got a whole bunch of people running around saying, oh, AI, we're not going to need software engineers. Your average large enterprise is probably going to go from 30 million lines of code to closer to 1 billion lines of code, if not more, okay? And that is going to require an awful lot of people, software engineers, using AI just to keep up with it.
ProCognita, Get Agile podcast.
Mapping strategy and why AI won't replace developers. Interview with Simon Wardley.
Hi and welcome to Get Agile podcast. I'm Tomasz Wykowski from ProCognita, and today with me is a special guest, Simon Wardley, also known for the Wardley maps. Before we get to conversation, what should I mention about Simon?
Oh, what should you mention about me? Well, first of all, it's delightful to be here in Warsaw. I mean, it's 30 years since I've been in Warsaw. So I used to, many years ago, work for a company called Wedel, a chocolate manufacturer. My grandfather is actually Polish. I mean, his side of the family, obviously, terrible and horrible things happened in those horrible places. But he came over he walked across Europe, joined the Royal Air Force, was one of the Polish pilots, navigators and gunners with the Royal Air Force, which changed the whole Battle of Britain outcome. As a young lad, I grew up with these stories. I came to Warsaw. I worked for a bit for Wedel through a company called Free-to-Lay. And so it's lovely to be back here and to see how much has changed in the last 30 years. So it's just a delight. And also, my nation owes a great deal debt to your nation for the past as well.
So welcome, and I'm going to just mention that you're here for the AgileByExample conferences. You just had a keynote on the Wardley Mapping.
Oh, yes.
Values and AIs.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. I came here to speak about mapping and then get into things like organizational structure and change. But listening to some of the conversations, as often happens, the danger of doing the final keynote is that you listen to the conversations, you get into discussions with people, and then you spend the night before furiously changing the slides. And so I very much did that, and took us down a path of technology change to AI, into the areas of culture and sovereignty, and what the implications of AI are in that space. But hopefully people enjoyed it.
Yes, so you get a great keynote, and by the way, if you haven't seen the keynote yet, then I highly recommend it. We're gonna put this under the recording of this podcast. So where should we start? Values, map, or AI in this case?
Oh gosh, huge subject. I suppose because I talk about AI and explain AI through a map, and I also talk about values through mapping out culture. The common connection between those is maps, so we better start with a map. And where do we start? I suppose we start with taking me all the way back to 2004, working for a company called Fatango, online photo service, with about 16 different other lines of business. We're doing very well, but we had a problem. The person in charge had no idea what they were doing. They were just making things up, and I was the person in charge. And so I went on this journey of trying to understand what is necessary for strategy. And I must admit, all the books I read got me nowhere. But I was
basically lead us to the lunch conversation we just had.
Yeah.
That most of the business are good despite having no real strategy stuff.
Well, okay, so the interesting thing about this is, I got into this journey of strategy, which led me to this understanding what a map is. But most organizations are run by narratives and stories. And of course, the problem with stories, we tell everyone that great leaders are great storytellers. So when I create a story, if you challenge it, you're challenging me as a person. So people get very, very defensive about the stories.
All the culture of the organization, because there is a founder story.
Exactly. So, But the thing is, does it matter? Well, this is part of the Red Queen effect. I mean, it's a bit like once you start to learn to map, you start to learn that there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all methodology. Doesn't matter whether it's investment finance or whether it's project management, and you learn to mix and blend multiple methodologies together. So, for example, when I'm looking at a very complicated problem, I might use extreme programming in one area, more Scrum in another area, and more towards the techniques of Six Sigma in another space, all simultaneously at the same time. And now that improves efficiency, as we've seen, and improves the speed at which we can do things. But if you're not doing that, if you're trying to use a one-size-fits-all, actually it doesn't matter too much as long as everybody else you're competing against is doing exactly the same.
So if we all just know about Scrum, because it's not even Scrum most cases, it's about incremental product development, what most companies do.
Yeah.
There is no one who can beat the order on the market with the approach.
If we're all hopeless, then no one gains an advantage. All right, it's as simple as that. It's okay to suck as long as everybody else that you're competing in is just as bad.
I just have an idea about having stickers with this one. It's okay as long as your competitors do that as well.
Exactly. Yeah, if we're all useless,
you can get this in the shop soon, online ProCognita shop with the stickers.
And the danger is that somebody isn't quite so hopeless. They start to use multiple methods, start to understand their landscape. They start to take advantage of that. And we've seen this with ecosystem players, people who really understand the space. So many years ago, I wrote a model, this is back in 2005, called the Innovate, Leverage, Commoditize model. It's very simple. You take pre-existing products, turn them to a utility. You allow other people to build on top. They're your free research and development department. You mine their metadata to spot future patterns, which you then commoditize to new component services. So what you're doing is you're getting everybody else to innovate. You're leveraging the ecosystem to spot future patterns, and you're gaining economies of scale. If you do that against other players who don't do that, then they're going to be at a massive disadvantage. So it's okay if no one does it. It's dangerous when one does.
Yeah, so I have few examples in my mind, but I want to hear your example on this one. So like a specific, because I mean the idea is great, but let's get to some just one specific example.
So AWS, Amazon Web Services, wrote a book called Reaching Cloud Velocity. There's about 17 pages of my mapping in there, including the ILC model. And so you think of it like this. If I take computing to a utility and expose that, people build on top. Now, their data is their data. Fine, you can't look at their data, it's their data. But you have to bill them for the service. The billing data is your data. So if you mine the metadata, the billing data, you can see what areas are growing. So if everybody's building, 90% of people are building, I don't know, kitten internet, so internet for kittens, and it's going nowhere, and 10% are building big data systems, you see that's rapidly growing. So you come up with a new, more commoditized form. So we'll give it a random name, we'll call it Elastic Map Reduce. Then what happens is you announce this, the people who are building that go, oh, you've eaten my business model, and everybody else cheers because they can now use this stuff to build new services, and so the game repeats. And you see this today with a little bit with OpenAI. You can spot when these patterns are happening. So they have these events and they announce something, and there's a whole bunch of, oh my God, all these people's business model has gone who were building on top. Well, yeah, you've just been harvested.
So you mean that the access to the data in this case is crucial?
Well, so it's the billing data that matters. So when somebody builds on your service, their data is their data. You can't look at that, but you've got to bill them for the service. So by billing, the billing has all the signals you need for identifying future areas of growth and change. So it's the billing in terms of if you're consuming my service and you're growing, I can see that because I'm billing you for that service.
As long as you know where to look, I think.
Well, if you've got enough of the ecosystem, you get a strong enough signal to identify where to look.
Cool. Okay, so we get an example, right?
Yeah.
Shall we move to map or?
Well, we can do. I mean, so that particular model, ILC came from looking at a map and working out how to play the map, because there was this old idea that you could be one or two off efficient, innovative, or customer focused. And what I realized is that by using signals in the map, you can do all three simultaneously at the same time and grow them all with the larger the ecosystem gets, the more innovative you seem to appear to be, more customer focused and more efficient all at the same time.
In different area of the component, this is what you mean?
Or in a specific area where you're focused on the map.
Okay.
So I better explain what a map is, and better start by explaining what it isn't. So most things that we have in organizations that we call maps are in fact graphs. So a graph is basically a diagram which has maybe a number of nodes and connections between them. A map, the difference between that and a map, because a map also has nodes and connections between them, is that in a map, the space itself has meaning. So if you move something in a map, it actually changes the meaning of that thing because the space itself has meaning.
So what you're saying, London Tube map is not a map.
So now that's a special class, because here, in the case of the London Tube map, what you've done is collapse all the possible options to the tube framework itself. So you can't, for example, in a tube map, go north, as in, halfway along the tube, I think I'm going north, because there is no space, there is no option. The space itself is collapsed to the actual lines of the map itself. So that is quite an unusual and quite specialist.
Yeah, I believe some people learn that, going this way or this way can be a completely different time. Despite you have free stop both ways.
But you can't go from a station and decide to go south where there is no line, because you've suddenly got a boring machine out and decide to go and do your own. It doesn't work like that, you see, because they're not actually. It's not a geographical map, but it is a map. It's just all the space has been collapsed to the lines themselves.
All right, so the graphs are missing the north and south, basically.
The concept of space itself. So in order to do that, so how do you give space meaning? You need a number of things. You need an anchor, such as a compass, like magnetic north, as you said. You need position of pieces relative, so north, south, east, or west of this. And you need something called consistency of movement. So if I'm going north, I'm going north. If I'm going south, I'm going south. Now, geographical maps have an advantage that if I'm going from, London to Manchester, it's unlikely that Manchester will have moved during my journey. That's because tectonic plates shift quite slowly. If my journey took 300 million years, it may well have moved during that time, but not within our lifetime.
I guess for the Iceland people, we need to record another episode with some different examples. But yeah, let's go.
Okay, so the difference. The difference between that landscape, a territorial landscape, and say a political, economic, social, technological landscape, is often the change. The tectonic plates are moving a lot faster. So if you think about technology, you can start off with the invention of digital computing, Z3 in 1943, and then you get custom-built examples like Leo Line's Electronic Office, and then you get things like products, IBM 650, and eventually over time it becomes more of a commodity, and then more of a utility with Amazon EC2, 2006. So you're talking 60 years. That's not 300 million years. That's 60 years. So the tectonic plates are shifting a lot faster. So you have to do somehow create consistency of movement in a space that is moving. The plates are moving quickly. And the way you do that is by describing that movement in terms of change itself. And so you end up creating a map with an anchor, position, and movement. And so for my maps, you start off by thinking about the anchor, the business, the users, the government regulators. You start describing their needs and what that needs and what that needs. So you describe a value chain or a supply chain if we're cross-industry. And then for the movement, well, all of these components evolve through a common pattern, Genesis, custom-built products and rental services, and then commodity utility services. You simply describe every single component, how evolved it is, and that gives you anchor position and movement, and that's a map.
Just a quick question, a
Yes.
side question. So have you seen any other maps, not graphs, maps being used in strategic planning?
So I've seen loads and loads of things which have been called maps. Which
Yeah,
I'm
this
afraid,
is what I'm asking. If you've seen maps, not the things
which
called
are actually
maps.
graphs.
Yeah, this is what I'm asking. If you've seen any other map.
Yeah, I mean, there are examples.
Okay,
Like there's things like Wardley Mapping, which is used for conflict resolution. Dave Snowden and the Cynefin, the people by the Cynefin community. He's come out with his own form of mapping as well. So there's lots of interest in this space, and there's lots of different alternative ways of doing it. So yes, I'm starting to see that, and which is always encouraging.
Cool. So we're moving to AI, which show up on your map
Yeah.
like 10 years ago, before it becomes the only word that you need to say in every single podcast and conference.
So this goes back to 2018 or thereabouts, roughly. So first of all, I used mapping a lot during the early days of cloud. I used to run strategy for a company called Canonical. They provide Ubuntu. And so we used the maps to understand what was going on in cloud. And we were like 3% of the operating system market against Microsoft and Red Hat. And we used the maps to target the space. I think between 2008 to 2010, we went from 3% to about 70% of cloud. I mean, Ubuntu still is a strong, dominant player in that space. And then, of course, we saw the serverless, and of course, we mapped out the shift of the runtime to more of a utility, and then we started to see this with Lambda, the whole sort of serverless approach. And every time we go through this, we obviously see new practices co-evolve. So in cloud, we got DevOps. Eventually, the serverless space, it was called FinOps. We get new things appearing. I mean, we get a whole bunch of common economic patterns. There's about 30 of them.
I need to ask this question in the interview. We can always cut it off, but do you invest based on maps? Do you do the long-term investment based on your maps?
So bizarrely enough, I live in I call it a swamp in a marsh, in a tiny little home which I own completely. I generate all my own power, pretty much, and I have a very simple life. So I actually don't do a lot of huge amount of investment. I mean, for a time I didn't do it at all, principally because I was also researching companies, and so I thought it was wrong to basically, I couldn't talk about companies that I was invested in. That situation is no longer true, so I could start using this stuff for investment, so maybe I will do. I haven't done in the past, but maybe I will change.
I'm waiting for the
but
feather chocolate in case you succeed.
I've certainly helped others do this, including friends of mine who use it for shorting companies and things like that as well. So
I'm sorry, I sidetracked us.
We were talking about. So we saw the shift of technology with serverless as well. So back in 2018, so AI is a field. It contains many different components. I hate the fact that it's all been just sort of condensed down to large language models, GPT, etc.
Because everybody see those.
Well, anyway, there are many different components, and some of those components are different stages of evolution. But one thing we talked about was machine cognition, or this generalized idea of machine cognition, and how that seemed to be evolving to more of a utility. We didn't know what it was going to be called. This is back in 2018. And so we were looking at the maps and co-evolution of practice and new needs. And it wasn't really that exciting, except for when we combined it with some of the other practices in the FinOps space. So this is where the idea of conversational programming environments, we started heavily talking about back in 2018. And then a friend of mine, Alexander Simovic, after I gave a presentation on this, went and built it and presented at AWS reInvent. And this was in 2018. So this was an AI system that you had a conversation with, and it built you other systems. If you roll forward to 2023, we now call that vibe coding. So Alexander was probably the first vibe coder. The machine cognition, we call it large language models, large multimodal models. Fair enough. The practices, we seem to be coming, well, they're all still emerging. So we come up with lots of different names for it. We haven't settled yet.
I think we need to stress out that you have a very narrow definition of vibe coding.
Oh, so so very specifically, vibe coding is when you build a system and you don't look at the code. There is significant difference between that.
Or you don't understand the code.
Oh, you don't have to because you don't look at it.
Yeah, but okay, so I just start the wording. If you look at but don't understand and still commit, is it vibe coding or not?
So there is difference between vibe coding, where I build a system but don't look at the code, and what we would call software development plus AI, where I use an AI to help me in software development. Software development itself is a craft, but I'm using AI to help me build something. And of course, I'm inspecting the code and reading the code and looking what the code does. That is different from I have no idea how to code stuff. I've just gone onto Lovable. I've given a whole bunch of prompts. It's built me something. Isn't it great? Let's put it into production, which can be quite terrifying.
And some of the stories are already online, so you can read those. All right. So we get this vibe coding coming in, right?
Mm-hmm. So many of the practices that we see are still emerging in this space. And we're making the same mistakes as we did in the past. So, for example, if I take the cloud era, 2006, 2007, your average large enterprise had maybe 2,000 physical machines. We get this shift from product to utility. So you get a whole bunch of new co-evolved practices, which later on we call DevOps, but you're going to get an explosion in terms of architectures. The reason for this is that many people at that time said it's going to save us loads of money and it's going to simplify things. Well, no, you're in competition with others. And one of the group will go, I'm not going to save money. I'm going to use this to do more stuff. And so what happens, you end up having to compete, and so you end up doing more stuff. So what I said back in, it must have been about 2008, is your average physical estate of a large enterprise would go from 2,000 physical machines to 50,000 virtual machines. So probably about 25 times in terms of how complicated the environment is.
And it has impact on the people in the organization.
So this all connects to something called Jevons paradox. So William Stanley Jevons, this is the coal question, which, about 1865 or something like that. They made steam engines more efficient, so people assumed we'd use less coal, but we end up using more coal. Because we made steam engines more efficient, they enabled us to do new things. And those new things, as they evolved, increased the demand for the underlying product. So in a similar way, we've made computing more of a utility. Oh, isn't it great? We'll reduce costs. No, we're going to end up doing more things that'll increase the underlying demand of compute infrastructure. And the problem, and then connect this back to the AI, the problem back in 2008, 2009, 2010, we'd get CIOs running around saying, oh, cloud, brilliant, we don't need sysadmins anymore. And the answer was, well, actually, you're going to need just as many, but using different practices just to keep up with the complexity of the state. They're not going to be racking machines, but, our state explodes 25-fold. So a whole bunch got rid of sysadmins and later on hired a whole bunch back as DevOps engineers. Same people, with a slightly different practice. You get exactly the same, I would suggest, going on in the software world with AI today. You've got a whole bunch of people running around saying, oh, AI, we're not going to need software engineers. Your average large enterprise is probably going to go from 30 million lines of code to closer to 1 billion lines of code, if not more, okay? And that is going to require an awful lot of people, software engineers, using AI just to keep up with it. But we won't call them that. We'll call them AI wranglers or something else.
So update your CV by now on LinkedIn. Remind me the one observation we had during the panel on Tuesday, so
Yeah.
2 days ago or yesterday, that a temporary consequence of that is that no one hires juniors right now.
So we are causing all sorts of damage to the pipeline of software engineering talent. Software development talent, I should say, because we've got a whole bunch of VCs running around out of self-interest saying large language models are going to get rid of. You're not going to need software developers anymore because magically it's going to solve all your problems and do it all for you.
And we just love those stories everywhere.
And we do. So a whole bunch of people are being put off coming into the industry. A whole bunch of people think, well, we no longer need to invest in skills and developing that capability in the industry. What we're going to see is the explosion in terms of the actual code base because of vibe coding. It wrote me 30,000 lines of code. I don't understand any of it, but it's great. We're going to see an explosion, and then we're going to have all these issues of having to maintain and manage this. And so you're going to have a whole new class. We're not going to call them, I imagine, software developers. We will call them AI wranglers or whatever. So it's the same people, but just using AI just to cope with even more complicated environments. Back in 2008, some of the companies who got rid of their sysadmins or tried to reduce them got into a terrible state because at the time that their estates are growing and they realized they needed these people with slightly different skills, so did a whole bunch of other companies. And there was all these new companies and new startups who could now afford to exist because basically compute became a utility. So there was a massive surge on talent, and you just couldn't find DevOps engineers, even though they were formerly called systems admins, but with slightly new different skill sets. It was just difficult to find them. So I think we're going to go through exactly the same. And I think Klarna is a great example because the CEO a couple of years ago said, we're getting rid of software engineers, and I believe they're currently hiring right now.
It's not so much in the newspapers anymore, but yeah. So, do I get it correct that one of this exponential growth of need for new talents, especially like 15, 16, 17, 19, it was pretty well seen in here in Poland. I don't know how it was in other countries, but we had a huge need for software development talents. Is it a consequence of this computing data memory? So AWS being cheap?
Well, the explosion of computing resources, and also you had serverless as well. So that's the runtime becoming a utility, making it cheaper and cheaper to build new things if you've got people capable of writing the code. Yes. And
we didn't have enough people capable, at least here, I don't know.
I think there was a desperate hunt for those.
Yeah, this is what
people.
I'm saying.
And also a desperate hunt for the former sysadmins who are now called DevOps engineers to maintain your underlying infrastructure if you had it. I think we're going to see exactly the same with software.
What I'm hearing, if you're 10 by now, or your kids are 10 by now, then becoming a AI herder, whatever.
AI herder, yeah.
it's a good moment to start this path.
Yeah, just cross out software engineer on your CV and put AI herder, and start learning. Yes, yeah. I think part of the problem, however, is that process of reviewing those systems and understanding the systems means you need that practice and that skill and that training to understand. We might call them AI herders. They still have to understand those patterns within software.
If we don't hire juniors, then they don't have place to learn.
Then we really are storing up problems. Yeah.
Okay, so we get this AI in the system. It's everywhere right now. Try to open fridge, try to open, I don't know, toothpaste.
You have no choice but to adapt to this world. I mean, it's not a question of if you're going to use it, it's a question of when.
And there are some consequences you are afraid of.
Yes. In order to explain that, we have to get into mapping cultural systems. So I won't go through the entire process of mapping cultural system. I will just say that once you map, you start to discover that we have behaviors within cultural systems are controlled by basically principles and values or beliefs. So, for example, principle would be, as an operational principle, focus on user need. And if you believe everyone's equal, your behavior is to focus on everybody's need. If you believe one group is more important than another, you focus on the need of that group. Now, those values and beliefs are controlled by memory in a collective, or influenced by memory, which is influenced by heroes, symbols, and stories. So what we collectively call art. So art impacts our values and beliefs. And we've used art to do this against cultures over a long, long time. Now, if you want to control that art, you need to control the tools, the medium, and the language. So the tools would be like, if it was books, it'd be the printing press, the medium would be paper, language, written word. If you control that, you control the art, you can influence and change people's values, beliefs, and behavior.
we've seen this pretty well in the East Europe.
Yeah, of course.
So
the interesting thing about the changes with AI is they're changing our tool sets, our medium, and our language. So we're going very non-deterministic language. Medium, it becomes more code as images, not code as text. And that changes the way we interact with things. And you've also got a change in the tool sets to things like copilots. And so this controls, but it's more than art. It, in fact, controls the way we reason around a particular space. And why is that problematic? It's problematic in the fact that if you hand over that decision-making process, because the real architecture, the real decisions of any software system are made in code, not in diagrams. And if you hand that over to an AI, then that AI might build it, but it will build it with whatever values and beliefs it's been trained with. And if you can't read that and you can't see that, then you have no way of challenging that. Now, why does that matter? I suppose it's a classic example of this would be the trolley problem. If I'm driving along a road, I can hit 5 people or 1 people. Who do I hit? Well, I hit the one person, hopefully, if that's the only choice I have. What if the one person's rich and the 5 people aren't? Well, hopefully you still just hit with the one person. What if it's a self-driving car, and how does it make the choices? What if the beliefs and values that are trained into the system are not your beliefs and values?
Say, for example, the more richer person in the accident, for example.
Well, I'm taking an extreme example here, but just to show the point is that when you are writing code, you are basically making the decisions about the system, and you are deciding the architecture of the system. It's not in the diagrams, it's in the code. And when you hand that over to a machine to do, it is making that same choice. But the beliefs and values it may have may not be the same as yours. And so this touches upon an issue of national sovereignty. We're maybe okay with the idea of, in the same way we were with Hollywood and other things, of having other people's beliefs and values imported into our culture. Maybe not, but at least we should talk about it.
I think that in this country that could be a lot of conversation about some of the holidays from West coming to Poland. So one of the heated discussion in Poland is Halloween. Should we embrace it or should we not embrace it? But there are more this kind of redefine let's say holidays that are coming to Poland from other countries, which also lead me to maybe dangerous question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. We're going to cut this off as well in worst case. So do you think that all this what is happening on the world level, do we also change the culture in this case? So all this what is happening, let's say in Europe, what is happening in the US, what is happening in the Middle East, do you think that there's a redefinition of the culture? Because you said that there's the stories that are being told, and it seems like the stories are being changed.
Art has always been a non-kinetic form of warfare. So we compete. So when we talk about competition, there are 3 basic forms. There's Because competition is the act of groups of people seeking something. So we can either do that by fighting others for that thing, so that's called conflict, or laboring with others, so collaboration, or helping others, so cooperation. So normally when we talk about competition, we normally use a mix of all three different forms, and we may compete with some to conflict with others, etc., etc. And we compete over multiple landscapes. So we've got territorial, we've got political, economic, social, technological, legal landscapes as well. We call it environmental for territorial. And we're very good at the territorial in terms of understanding the landscape, the borders, where our culture and our value exists within those borders, etc. If you cross the borders, we conflict, we collaborate, cooperate elsewhere. But we also compete over many other landscapes. And those are often non-kinetic forms of warfare. So art is a great example of how to spread the values of one culture to another culture. And that's what we did with books and with Hollywood. And to be honest, what's going on with large language models as well today. It's a spread of one set of values to a different environment. So what you're saying,
it's a warfare tool?
Yeah, I mean, even video games are. I mean, video games are the single largest form of art, as far as I'm aware today, or it's certainly close to. Yeah, I mean, you get values being embedded in those games. I mean, I think it's called Holy Defense, is a AAA video game produced by Hezbollah. I don't think Hezbollah produces those games because they're big gamers. I think they produce those games because they help spread their values and their beliefs.
I hope you guys don't look for that game after this.
No, but well, Poland is. I mean, Poland has an incredible gaming industry. You've got CD Projekt Red and others. I mean, it's
okay. I need to mention Techland because not just us.
Oh, Techland as well.
Not just one. Right? Okay, we need to have at least two.
No. We talk about.
And we
Techland.
say hey to both.
Well, there are many, but the well, it's quite remarkable that Poland has got, in the gaming world, you've probably got China, US, and you've got Poland. I mean, the Scottish government is even investing in trying to build up its games network as well. It's like these are the future Hollywoods. I mean, I hope people in your government realise just how important the gaming industry is.
If anyone from the Polish government watch us till this moment, then please invest into the Polish games. I don't think that happened ever, but that might be the game changer.
Well, no, massively I would, but I mean it's like having the new Hollywood literally on your doorstep. I mean, it's a remarkable position to be in. I mean, Poland should be very proud of this. So, but these are all non-kinetic forms of warfare. They influence and change other people's perceptions and other cultures' perceptions through the interactions with these forms of art.
So we end up to who has large language model. Who control large language model, then he controlled the culture.
Yeah, ultimately they control how you reason about stuff, and so it's interestingly, China is pushing down a very open route now, and I would expect it to extend down to open training data, simply because many of the other competitors can't go down that path, not because of issues like copyright, although I'm sure there are those issues, but more because they probably haven't actually kept a record of what they've actually trained these systems with. So you've got, this interesting game going on with China and the US. Honestly, Europe and other continents need to have their own position in this space.
All right. So I would like to conclude with something optimistic, because we just put like a, we're doomed kind of scenario by now.
Why are we saying doom?
Well, some of the people can get to some reasonable thinking about the consequences of language models which impact their life significantly without them being able to say anything about this.
Yeah, but it's not a doom, it's an opportunity. There's an opportunity here for Europe to take a position on this.
Yeah, and my question would be how to leverage this opportunity. So what would be your recommendation for anyone listening to us, developers, software people, but also anyone else?
So The UK, we had something called the AI Safety Summit, and there was a group of people who were all about open source AI, frontier AI, dangerous, blah de blah. It's all about guardrails. And there was another group of people, a much smaller group, I'm afraid, who we need to take a position on open source and open training data, and we need to play into that game. Now, China's going down that path. France is doing a good job going down that path as well. I'd like to see a real push from Europe into open source AI, and by open source AI, I mean all the symbolic instructions, i.e. all the symbols that change the behavior of the system. And that's not just the code, that's also the training data as well, because that's what they are, symbols that change the behavior of the system. So that's what I would like to see.
And a place you would refer people to if they wanted to learn a bit more about it.
About Wardley Maps?
That's my second question. The first question is we talk about this open AI, so maybe not open, but like common source, common AI.
Open source AI.
Open source AI, yeah.
There's some interesting stuff which was done by the Allen Institute. There's Mistral. There's obviously the play by the Chinese government as well. It encourages industry in that way. Is there a central hub of forum I can think of? Not off the top of my head. Yeah, I mean, there's sorts of groups like Open UK and other groups circling around that space, but there's not one off the top of my head.
If we find any, then we'll put it on the recording.
Oh, that's fine.
The second question was, if the people want to learn more about the Wardley mapping.
If you want to learn, I put a whole bunch of Medium posts, which is it's about 18, 19 chapters. It's all Creative Commons, help yourself. So you just go medium.com/Wardley Maps. You can read that there. A number of other people have turned that into books, and there's about 17 books on mapping. I would just search Wardley Maps, and you'll find videos. There's people doing, in Poland, you've got Chris Daniel, who has WardleyMapping.com. He teaches people there. You've got Ben Warsaw, who has Learn Wardley Maps, who teaches people. There's lots of people in the community doing this. So I would just type in Wardley Mapping and you'll find something.
And we need to mention your website as well, probably.
I have my vibe-coded website, swardleymaps.com, which I play with and do lots of silly experiments on other bits and pieces, and basically link to other places.
All right. I just love the conversation. So probably this is the moment we should stop, but it was awesome. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
To learn more, visit procognita.com/getagile.